Joshua 21, the cities of the Levites. So remember, in the last few chapters of Joshua, Joshua has led the people of Israel across the Jordan River. They've done battle as one united Israeli army. That is all finished. That doesn't mean, now hang on this thought, this truth, that doesn't mean just because the assembled one united army of Israel has disbanded into their tribes, that doesn't mean all the people, all the Canaanites have been dispossessed. It doesn't mean they have totally killed every Canaanite that lives in the land. They have not done that. But Joshua has given them all their allotted territories. Yahweh has decided where each of these tribes, the 12 tribes of Israel, would live. They've all got their own territories now. We saw last time that now that each of the 12 tribes have been given their allotted territory, that they were to set up these 6 cities of refuge, because God is such a respecter of the life that He created and He gives to man, that if someone accidentally killed another man, unintentionally, we call it manslaughter today, that person would be protected from being killed. That accidental killer would be protected from being killed in these cities of refuge. So God's not protecting the one who was killed. God protects the one who accidentally kills, because that's the kind of respect God has for the life that He breathes into us. So now we have to answer the question logically. Okay, all the tribes have their land. You've set up these cities of refuge in case there's accidental murder, accidental killing. It wouldn't be murder. But what about the Levites? All the tribes have their land, but we haven't said a thing about this Levitical tribe, the sons of Levi, the third son of Leah, the third son of Jacob. They haven't been mentioned in a while. What about the Levites? Where are they to live? If they don't get a tribal territory, an actual bordered off, circled piece of land, what, God, are you going to do with the Levites? And that's where we start in Joshua chapter 21. What about the Levites? These are the priests. The high priest comes from the family of Aaron, a Levite. Look what it says in chapter 21, verse 1. Then the heads of the household of the Levites approached Eleazar the priest, who was high priest in that day, and Joshua the son of Nun, and the heads of the household of the tribes of the sons of Israel. So Levi has gathered the priest and the leader Joshua and the leaders of Israel, and they have approached them and said, don't forget us and what Moses through Yahweh, or God Yahweh through Moses promised us. So we continue. In verse 2, they spoke to them at Shiloh. A good Southern American would call that Shiloh, but the Bible, the Hebrew pronunciation is Shiloh. They spoke to them at Shiloh in the land of Canaan. And this is what the Levites presented to the leaders of Israel, to Eleazar the high priest and to Joshua. God, Yahweh commanded through Moses to give us, the Levites, cities to live in, with their pasture lands for our cattle. So not only were the Levites promised by Moses to get cities, but they were also promised to get surrounding pasture lands for their animals. But I have to ask the question, and we have to look at it for just a minute. Why didn't the Levites get their own territory? Why is it that God decided to spread the Levites throughout all of the 12 tribes of Israel? Because the Levites and their 48 cities were scattered all throughout Israel. But why didn't Levi? You would think if they're the priests and the high priests and the teachers of Israel, you would think that their territory would be around what city? Jerusalem. I mean, that's the logical thing, that their territory would be around Jerusalem. Remember in the 40-year wandering, when Israel would wander through the forest through those 40 years, and every time they set up the tabernacle, it was the Levites who were the first ring around the tabernacle. The tribe of Levi surrounded the tabernacle. And you think, well, why wouldn't it be different in Jerusalem? Well, these are the reasons why it's different. There are 2 reasons. The question is, why did God disperse the Levites throughout all the land of Canaan? The first reason is a negative reason. The second reason is the grace of God itself. But this is the first reason. Let's go back into history a bit and see what happened. Who was this man Levi? Now, I'm not talking about Levi's descendants. I'm talking about the actual man Levi now. Levi, the son of Jacob, the third son of Jacob. And in Genesis chapter 49, remember the scene. In Genesis 49, Jacob, Levi's father, the father of the 12 sons of Israel, he's on his deathbed. And he gathers his sons around, and one by one he tells of his son of his children's future. He prophesies to them what's coming for them. And so in Genesis 49 verse 5, he gets to his sons Simeon and Levi. And this is what their father prophesied about them. He said Simeon and Levi are brothers, obviously, but what he means is they're one and the same of soul. They're the same type of person. Their swords are implements of violence. So here we're thinking, well, wait a minute. What did Simeon and Levi do to make their father say, you people are one and the same, and your swords are implements of violence? Anybody remember? What did Simeon and Levi do? Let's keep reading. Let my soul not enter into their counsel. Let not my glory be united with their assembly, because in their anger they killed men. When? What's he talking about? What? Remember, there was a daughter of Jacob named, what was her name? Dinah. And she was raped by a man named Shechem. And so Shechem came, the father of Shechem came to Jacob and said, we want, my son wants your daughter as a wife. He loves her. He cherishes her, wants your daughter as a wife. And Simeon and Levi came up to their dad and said, we got a deal for them. Let them all get circumcised like we are. And then they can join our tribe. Then they can marry our daughter. But they have to become as we are. That was the deal. But in their minds, they were devising a plan. And the plan was, when the men of Shechem all got circumcised and they were hurting and unable to function because they were healing from the circumcision, Simeon and Levi went in and killed all the men. They slaughtered the men of this town. Not only was the town called Shechem, but the son was called Shechem too. They slaughtered the men of their town. They murdered them because that one man had raped their daughter. Now, this isn't letting rapists off the hook, but the fact is, God is the one who seeks vengeance and takes vengeance. He didn't need Simeon and Levi to do that, and he certainly didn't tell them to do it. And sin has consequences. So by the time we get to Jacob, and Jacob is looking at his two sons, he said, you guys are impetuous. You do things that you shouldn't. And you're guilty of murder. And in your anger you killed men, and in their self-will they lamed oxen, other events we're not told about. And so what does Jacob say about Simeon and Levi? Now remember who Levi is. These are the priests. These are the mediators between God and man. It sure doesn't sound like they're being lifted up in this verse. Jacob says, cursed be their anger, for it is fierce, and cursed be their wrath, for it is cruel. And look what it says in the very last line. Why is God dispersing Levi? Because he told them he would. I will disperse them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. Right? Clear enough? That's what he said he was going to do. When you get into the land of Canaan, I'm going to spread you out. I will disperse you. Now, there's another reason, because I want you to see God's mercy. I want you to see how God gives second chances, third chances, infinite chances really, in His grace and in His mercy. I want you to see the mercy and forgiveness of God in the dispersing of the Levites. I want to show you something that's positive. It's important for the Levites to be dispersed. all over the land of Canaan because God would make them the teachers, the leaders, and the priests of Israel. Look what happened. Remember Exodus chapter 32? Moses is up on Mount Sinai getting the law from God. God's teaching Moses all these things. This is how you should build the tabernacle, and its tents should be this big, and its wood, it should be acacia wood, and you're going to make the Ark of the Covenant this way, and the table of showbread, and the altar of incense. He's telling him all these things, and then he says, and your brother Aaron, he's to be the high priest. Now Moses and Aaron came from the family of, somebody guess, Levi. They're Levites. They're descendants of Levi. And God had said to Levi, your anger and your wrath are fierce. I'm going to curse you. I'm going to spread you all throughout Israel. So here we have this event that takes place later in history. Moses has come down off the mountain. God says, your people, those people that you led out of Egypt, Moses, they have made for themselves a golden calf and they're worshiping it instead of worshiping me. And this is this event. Now Moses saw that the people were out of control. He's come down off of Mount Sinai. They're in this frenzy. They're partying. They're loud. They're rambunctious, worshiping this golden calf. And it says, why were the people out of control? Because Moses' brother, who just a moment ago on Mount Sinai, God had chosen to be the high priest of Israel. Aaron had let them get out of control to be a derision among their enemies. And then Moses stood in the gate. So what does Moses do? He sees what's going on with the tribes of Israel there at the base of Mount Sinai. And Moses makes a statement. Whoever is for Yahweh, not for this ridiculous, idolatrous, pagan calf, but whoever wants to continue worshiping Yahweh, the one true God, the one who truly brought us out of Egypt, come to me. And who showed up? The sons of Levi. And all the sons of Levi gathered together to Moses. There's 12 tribes down there on the plains. Only one came and said, we will worship Yahweh alone. The Levites. So would God still scatter them? Yes, but for a different reason, a holy reason of God. They would become the teachers of Israel. But I want you to see why God scattered them. Number one, because he cursed them through Jacob, but he also, this scattering was also worked out for good. Just because it was a disciplinary action, a punishment to Levi, doesn't mean God can't turn that punishment into a blessing. And that's exactly what he did. Yahweh took the Levites, these people that gathered to Moses, he elevated them. Instead of their wrath and their anger being fierce, God elevated these fierce people. When they came to Moses, he called them out and he elevated them to the positions of teachers and the counselors of the Word of God, the law of Moses, and the priests in Israel. That's grace and mercy. That's what that is. Deuteronomy 33:10, I'm proving to you that God called this tribe that their father had cursed. God called this tribe through forgiveness and mercy to lead Israel spiritually. It's a beautiful story. It's a story to me of no matter where you come from, God can use you. He can turn you, He can craft you into something spiritually powerful that He can use. And the Levites are a beautiful example of that. They came from a murderer and rose to the position of high priest in Israel. Only by the grace of God. Deuteronomy 33:10, Moses is speaking and writing, and he's speaking of the Levites, and he says, they, the Levitical tribe, the tribe of Levi, the third son of Jacob and Leah, that tribe shall teach your ordinances to Jacob and your law to Israel. Of all the tribes, the people that God elevated to be the teachers, the counselors of the law, the Levites. Another verse, 2 Chronicles 35:3. He also said to the Levites, and here's the phrase I want you to see, who taught all Israel and were holy or set apart, distinct among their brothers and cousins. They were distinct according to Yahweh. That's because He rose them up to be the high priests and the priests. So he also said to the Levites who taught all Israel and who were holy to the Lord, put the holy ark in the house which Solomon the son of David, king of Israel, built. This other part doesn't matter. I'm just going to read it. It will be a burden on your shoulders no longer. Now serve Yahweh your God and His people Israel. I'm not going to tell that story. We don't have time. The Levites were the teachers of Israel. 2 Chronicles was written very, very late in Israel's history. It was a look back on what had happened. Even after the Babylonian captivity, 2 Chronicles was written. So this is the latest, the last book written, actually penned. And what does it say about the Levites? They started out as fierce murderers. They ended up the teachers of Israel. That's the grace of God. Interesting thought. I could say a lot about that statement. They started out the murderers who were cursed by their father, and they ended up the teachers of Israel, because God is a God of second chances. Nehemiah, one more verse and we move on from this topic. Then Nehemiah, chapter 8, verse 9, then Nehemiah, who was the governor, and Ezra the priest and the scribe. This is after the Babylonian captivity. Israel's gone out for idolatry for 70 years. They were sent back by Cyrus the Persian. Nehemiah comes back. Ezra comes back. This is a long time after they enter the land with Joshua. And who is still the priest? Who are still the teachers? And the Levites who taught the people, they're still the teachers of Israel. The little, I point here because this is where Troy and Trish sat last time. But when they told me they were naming their baby Kohen, I told them both, you know that the Kohen in Israel in Hebrew is the priest. The Kohen is the Levitical high priest tribe. So if you know a Jew whose last name is Cohen, C-O-H-E-N, or Cohn, C-O-H-N, or by any other spelling, if those consonants are in the name, those are Levites. Those people are Levites. They are the priestly family of Israel. They probably don't know it, but they are of the tribe of Levi. They were meant to be the teachers of Israel. So the Levites who taught the people said to all the people, "This day is holy to the Lord your God. Do not mourn or weep." For all the people were weeping when they heard the words of the law. Why would you weep when you hear the words of the law if you're keeping it? You wouldn't. You would weep when you heard the words of the law if you realized, oh my word, God has designed us and given us this law of Moses to follow so that He would bless us for our obedience, and we are not doing that. And that causes a Jew to fall on his knees and weep. And that's what was going on. And see, I'm telling the story. I don't want to. Nehemiah told him, not today. Today is a holy day. Today is a day of celebration. Yes, God knows you've been in covenant violation. You've been disobeying the law, but we're not thinking about that today. Our eyes are on the Lord. Today we rejoice. So, in verse 4, the lot came out for the families of the Kohathites. Levi had 3 sons. That's the bottom line. One of their names was Kohath. You see him in verse 4. You can underline it, circle it, whatever, just so you can delineate it. These were the sons of Levi, the actual biological first generation children of Levi. Kohath, in verse 6, you see another one, Gershon. And number 7, you see the third one, Merari. Those were the 3 sons of Levi. And so to those 3 sons' tribes, these were the cities. So the lot came out for the families of the Kohathites first. And the sons of Aaron, the priest, who were of the Levites, received 13 cities. So now they're being given cities. And look where they're coming from. They don't have a territory. They're being given individual dotted cities. Look at this map throughout the land of Canaan. All those are the 48 cities, including the 6 cities of refuge. That is how the map looks. Shechem, by the way, where the tabernacle is right here in the middle. That's where the tabernacle is as we're reading this in Joshua. So the Kohathites, their lot came first. It tells of their 13 cities. And where did God settle the Kohathites? Look what it says: in the tribe of Judah, in the tribe of Simeon, and in the tribe of Benjamin. That's where the Kohathites that's where they got their cities, among those 3 tribes. In verse 5 it says, the rest of the sons received 10 more cities from the tribe of Ephraim, from the tribe of Dan, and from the half-tribe of Manasseh. That tells you, if you go into Israel and you know what the geography looks like, you know what the map looks like, you can drive through there and say, this is where the Kohathites lived. This is where the Levi's son Kohath. This is the area of Israel where God gave them cities and where they lived. Let's keep going. Verse 6 says, the sons of Gershon, this is the other son of Levi, they received 13 cities. And where did they get their cities from? Not the same tribes, but from different tribes. From Issachar, from Asher, from Naphtali, and from the other half of the tribe of Manasseh. Manasseh was split. Remember, Manasseh had a portion of land right here on the east or the west side of the Jordan River, and Manasseh also had the other half of Manasseh lived on the west side of the river. So Gershon gets their cities from another section of tribes. And look at what it says in verse 7, the sons of Merari, the other son of Levi. They received 12 cities, and where did they get them from? From the remaining tribes, from the tribes of Reuben and Gad and Zebulun. And if you count all those tribes, what number do you think you'll come up with? 12 is the answer. 12. They got cities from each of the 12 tribes of Israel. God did exactly what He said He would do in Genesis 49, and He scattered the tribe of Levi. But He didn't do it for discipline, partly for that because He promised He would do it, but He did it to bless the people of Israel. You know, no one in Israel, look at this map, realizing that Israel, that land that you see is tiny. I mean, we're talking about New Jersey and part of Maryland if you laid it on top of an American map. It's a tiny postcard of a piece of land. And with these 48 cities of the Levites spread out, it's thought that there was not a single Jew in Israel. Listen to this fact. Not a single Jew in Israel who lived more than 10 miles from a teacher of the law of God. If you wanted to learn the Word, God gave it. God provided the law to be taught all over the land of Canaan by the Levitical priests. That's grace. Grace that He elevated Levi, and grace to Israel that He scattered Levi so that the teachers of the law, the maintainers of the law, the counselors of the law, were all over Israel so that no Jew could say, I haven't seen a Levitical priest all my life. Well, there's one 10 miles down the road. You can get there this afternoon. Nobody had an excuse. God had provided. God, this provider that we're talking about on Sundays and Wednesday nights, provided perfectly for the people of Israel. He had a Levite scattered in every territory, in every one of the tribes of Levi, every one of the tribes of Israel. The Levites were scattered. But why? Why? Not why did He do it, but why would that be needed? What were the Canaanites? What did the Canaanites believe? Who did the Canaanites worship? Who would Israel be tempted to fall into the worship of if they didn't have leaders of the Word of God and the law of Moses scattered all over Israel saying, no, no, no. No pagan idolatry. No Baal. No Chemosh. No Molech. No Asherah. None of that. Israel worships the one true God, Yahweh, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And Israel could be reminded and taught, and the law could be maintained, and the pure worship of Yahweh could continue because there were teachers of the law all over the land. That's why He did it. Teachers of the law all over the land. Now, there's another listing, and I forget where it is, in 1 Chronicles probably. There's another listing of the cities of the Levites. And it's slightly different than this listing. And you say, well, wait a minute, how can it be different? There you see the people that want to thump our Bible say, well, see, your Bible's inconsistent because you've got one list of cities here, and then when you go to see the other list of cities, they're not all the same cities. Now, why would that be? No. I think sadly the reason is because even though God appointed all these cities and the Levites were to go into the territory of Ephraim, and the people of Ephraim were to help the Levites destroy the Canaanites who lived in those cities, they didn't all do it. They didn't obey the Lord perfectly, just like the rest of the 12 tribes didn't obey the Lord perfectly. We've gone through these chapters in Joshua where it says only this particular people they didn't drive from the hillside. What did God say to do? Go into the land of Canaan. I've given them 400 years to come to me and worship. They have refused, and I have decreed that everything in the land of Canaan shall die. Kill everything that breathes. And Israel didn't do that. And so they allowed the paganism, they allowed the idolatry to remain. And the priests, the Levites, that were scattered throughout the land so that this paganism could be squelched, either weren't strong enough to do their jobs or didn't do their jobs at the end of the day, because paganism took over Israel. Israel didn't defeat paganism in the land and purify the land. What happened instead was the bad apple ruined the whole bunch. Paganism drew Israel into it. False god worship drew Israel, and they walked away from Yahweh. Sad truth, but that's the truth. The Levites did not succeed in their mission to teach Israel the law, to maintain the ordinances of the law, the knowledge of God's Word among the people of Israel. They simply didn't succeed. That was their job as the teachers of the Word, to teach properly, to make sure that all the Canaanites were killed. That was their job, and they didn't do it. So idolatry then was widespread across Israel, and I'm talking about in a very short amount of time. Because we're about to turn a couple of pages and be in the book of Judges. Historically, just a few years down the road, a very, very few years. And Israel is steeped in false god worship. So it's a beautiful story of what God provided and how God scattered the Levites to teach and maintain and counsel and be the priests of God. But the truth of the story is that they utterly failed. Israel became paganized very, very quickly by their own choice. Verse 9 says, they gave these cities which are here mentioned by name. I'm not going to go over those cities. It doesn't matter. The listing of them is in the Bible. The spots where we think they are, a lot of those we know. Some of those are very good archaeological guesses. It doesn't matter. The fact is they were scattered like polka dots on a dress. They were scattered all over Israel. In verse 41, I want to drop your eyes to verse 41. I want you to see God's faithfulness. Did God do what God promised to do? Even though Israel didn't defeat all the Canaanites, even though the Levites in all these different tribal territories didn't get all of their cities, even though that didn't occur because Israel was faithless to God, did God maintain His faithfulness to Israel? What's the answer? Yes, without question. And look what it says in verse 49. All the cities of the Levites in the midst of the possession of the sons of Israel were 48 cities with their pasture land. That includes the cities of refuge. These cities each had its surrounding pasture lands, thus it was with all the cities. So the tribes agreed, we will give you these cities and its pasture lands. Verse 43 brings to a close the distribution of the land into its tribal territories. It's a look back, it's a historical overview, a look back on what Yahweh has done in fulfillment of His promises to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I will give to you and your descendants the land of Canaan. That's why we call it the Promised Land. Because 500 years earlier, God promised to give this land to Abraham and his descendants for an eternal inheritance. So verse 43, so the Lord gave Israel. Did Yahweh do what He said He would do? Yes, Israel is in the Promised Land. They're not living wholly obediently, But God brought them into the land. So the Lord, Yahweh, gave them rest on every side. Verse 43, the Lord gave Israel all the land which He had sworn. The fact that they didn't defeat the land was not a fault of God. God led them into the land, gave them the power of the military to do it. The fact that they didn't do it was an unfaithfulness on Israel's part, not God's. That's what Joshua is bringing up. The fact that they didn't defeat and kill all the Canaanites the way God through Moses decreed, that was Israel's fault, not God's fault. Not Yahweh. Yahweh did everything He said He would. Yahweh, the Lord, gave Israel all the land which He had sworn to give to their fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and they possessed it and lived in it. So God here is teaching us, even though man can be unfaithful, I remain faithful. I remain loyal to my promise. I make promises and I keep them. I'm trustworthy, I'm reliable, I'm honest, I'm generous. God did what He said He would do. Exactly what He said He would do. If you will follow me into battle, I'll turn every enemy over to you. You will defeat them. But if you will not follow me in battle, you're going to fall to the enemy and paganism will live in the land. God did His part. Verse 44, the Lord gave. In verse 43, the Lord gave. In verse 44, the Lord gave. He did everything He said He would. The Lord gave rest on every side according to all that He had sworn to their fathers. He kept His promise entirely. That does not mean that Israel had taken possession of the entire promised land. What it means is that He ushered them in there just like He said He would. I'll prove that with the verse in just a second. They never took over the whole promised land. Israel, since the days of Abraham, have never possessed all the land that God promised to give them. And that's the fault of Israel. One day they will possess all the land when Jesus the Christ is the King of Israel in the future. So He gives them rest. He did everything according to all He had sworn to their fathers. No one of their enemies stood before them. The Lord gave all their enemies into their hand. So again, had Israel defeated every single one of the Canaanites? Had they killed them all? No. And we've seen in the book of Joshua, the past 4 or 5 chapters, that there were a lot of pagan Canaanites they left alive. They said they couldn't kill them. God said, I'll kill every one of them. But where Israel faltered, whether they were scared, lazy, we don't know the reasons, but whatever the reasons were that Israel didn't fight and kill all the Canaanites, that's not the fault of Yahweh. That was the fault of Israel. Yahweh did everything He said He would do. So every time Israel went into proper battle following Yahweh, they killed all the enemies. And every time they didn't do that, well, the enemies lived. So the Lord did everything He said He would do is the point of this. And that's what Joshua, look at Joshua in these words, elevating God higher and higher and higher and higher. God gave, God gave, God gave. So when Israel trusted Yahweh and followed His instructions, the land was conquered and their enemies were defeated. But when Israel did not follow God's instructions, the land wasn't conquered. All these pockets of paganism remained, and the enemies were not defeated. But that's not God's side. God's problem. There were clearly more territories that needed to be killed, because after this, look at this verse on the board. After this, when Joshua is giving his final charge to his brothers of Israel, this is what Joshua said: Yahweh your God, the Lord your God, He will thrust them out before you. That's a future tense verb. In the future, Yahweh will continue thrusting out your enemies before you, because it wasn't completed yet. He will thrust them out from before you and drive them out from before you, and you will, in the future, little by little, you will possess their land, just as the Lord your God promised you. So there was more land, more cities, more people that needed to be conquered in battle that had not been done. Look at what it says in verse 45. Not one of the good promises. Remember this, Christian. Remember this word. Remember this verse. Not one of the good promises which Yahweh has made to the house of Israel failed. Not one. Does that mean Israel never failed? No, that's not what it says. God did everything He promised He would do. Not one of the good promises which Yahweh had made to the house of Israel failed. All came to pass. And I'm here to tell you that the Bible also says, I am the Lord, I do not change. In Malachi 3:6, God says, I am the Lord Yahweh, I do not change. So if in the book of Joshua, chapter 21, verse 45, if the promises that God makes do not change, if the promises that God made to Israel, if not one of them failed, not even one, if all of the promises God makes come to pass, what then about the promises He makes you and me? Like this one. Believe on the Lord Jesus Christ and you will be saved. He that believes in the Son has life. He that does not believe the Son does not have life, but my wrath, God's wrath, continues to be on him. Is He going to keep that promise? Is He going to keep the promise? Are you saved eternally because of the death of Jesus Christ on the cross? God said that in the Bible, but can you rely on that promise? Or will God one day change His mind and say, you know what? There wasn't enough. The cross of Jesus wasn't enough. I want more. And it's too late to get more because they're all dead, so I'm sending them all to hell, to the lake of fire. Can that ever happen? Or is this a God who also tells us, I do not change? I make promises, I keep promises forever. I don't change. So the promises that He's made to us to keep us until the day of redemption, they're all trustworthy. He's reliable. So you say, why would God tell us all these things in the Bible about the Levitical cities, about all these territories that Joshua got, or that the land of Canaan got? Who cared, the land of Israel? The people of Israel in the land of Canaan. Why does He go through all these details? So that we can look back in the Bible and say, well, you know what? I know why He scattered them, because He promised them that He would. Through Jacob, He promised that He would scatter the Levites. That's why He did it. And then later, the Levites, when they banded around Moses to worship Yahweh only, it turned to forgiveness and it turned to blessing. And so He scattered them throughout Israel. So He tells us these stories so we can look back and build our faith and our reliability in this God. Can I trust Him? And you keep turning the pages and say, well, yeah, He said He was going to do something there, and way over here, yep, there He did it. And He said He was going to do something here, and yep, there He did it. You know, in the book of Isaiah, I've been reading through the book of Isaiah. I hope you all have your, clean the dust off your one-year Bibles and get them out and start reading them again. I read that Bible all the time. Every year I go through that Bible. And it's a fascinating, I just love the way it's chopped up. It makes it digestible, easily digestible, and easy to meditate on in the short little daily passages. But I'm reading through the book of Isaiah right now in my one-year Bible. And every time God says, and He says it so many times in the book of Isaiah, I am the only God, there is none beside me. And you know how He proves it? Over and over He says, go ask of your gods what's going to happen in the future. And then you come back and tell me what they say. God says, I am the God who prophesies the future and makes it happen. In the book of Isaiah, God made a prophecy, a virgin shall conceive and bear a child, and she shall call his name Emmanuel, which means God with us. That was written in 700 BC, 700 years before a virgin would conceive and bear a child. God threw that prophecy out there and said, Satan, try to stop me. And so how did Satan try to stop Him? Because he sure tried to stop Him. He tried to stop Him in many ways. He tried to stop the King of the world. He tried to stop the Lamb of God from coming to earth. Even after He was born, He had Herod send out the army to Bethlehem and the surrounding cities to kill every male child 2 and under. He was after that deliverer. Satan did not want that deliverer to come to earth. But could God be stopped is the question. Could God's prophecy in Isaiah, could God's prophecy be stopped? No. Jesus of Nazareth was born of a virgin. And so in the book of Isaiah, God presents Himself as this God who has the omniscience, the all-knowledge to tell the future, because it's all laid out perfectly before Him. He learns nothing. He knows everything at the same time. So of course He can tell you what's going to happen in the future. And over, He tells Israel, you got to go back into your history. You got to go back into your history, Israel. You got to see every time I prophesied something and every time it came true. Why then do you continue to worship your little wooden idols? You know that I'm the only God who can do this. I'm the only God who exists. And I love it that all those times in Isaiah, he also gives the prophecy of the coming Messiah through the book of Isaiah. Isaiah chapter 61, Isaiah chapter 62, Isaiah chapter 53. Over and over in the book of Isaiah, he pushes that prophecy that Messiah will come. He tells us more than any other writer of the Old Testament what Messiah would do in Isaiah chapter 53. And all the while in the book of Isaiah, he's saying, I'm a God who tells the future, and I'm a God who sees it through. Because I not only have the knowledge to look forward, I have the power to get it done, and no one can stop me. So why not a prophet like Isaiah to prophesy the greatest truths about the Jesus who would come? Why not Isaiah? Because it's in the book of Isaiah where God builds Himself up as a promise-keeping God. 700 years before Jesus. The proper worship of Yahweh in Joshua chapter 22. We're done with chapter 21. I want to introduce this. We'll cover just a little bit of it. Israel is in the land. There's still much fighting to be done. But the 12 tribes know geographically exactly where God wants them to live. The Levites have been given their cities, so the Levites know exactly where God wants them to dwell in the nation of Israel, the land of Canaan. So the settlements have all been accomplished as far as paperwork, at least. It's all been decided where everyone would live. And now what needs to be decided or spoken of is the fact that now that Israel is in this promised land, you have to continue to worship Yahweh properly. He didn't give you the land for no reason. He gave you this land to worship Him there so that He could come and dwell there. Remember where it is that God would choose to dwell in Israel. This place that He called the tabernacle or the tent of meeting. So Israel's living in the promised land, the land of Canaan. Where were they supposed to bring their sacrifices? In all of the land of Canaan, where was Israel? There was only one place they were supposed to bring their animal sacrifices, the sacrifices that would cover their guilt, cover their sin. They would slaughter the animals, the priests would gather the blood. Where was that to occur? No, not Jerusalem, not yet. Right there at the tabernacle. Wherever God chose to put that tabernacle, and it was in several places in the next few hundred years, it moved. But right now that tabernacle is set up in Shiloh. And so that was the only place in Israel. This is very, very important for Joshua chapter 22 to understand why Israel almost went into a civil war. They've been in the land for 7 years and they almost turn on each other and destroy each other because of that tent right there. Because God said, you will worship me and bring your burnt offerings and your guilt offerings and your sin offerings and your peace offerings and all your votive offerings. You will bring all your offerings to my tabernacle and my priest. And in chapter 22, we see that there was something that occurred that made it look like the tribes of Gad, Reuben, and the half-tribe of Manasseh that were going to move back across to the east of the river, that they were going to disobey God and worship God at a different place. And that would have destroyed Israel even quicker than the civil war would have. That's what happens in Joshua chapter 22. Worship me properly at the tabernacle through the priesthood, the Levitical priests. So in Joshua chapter 22, just look at a minute of it. Joshua summoned the Reubenites. He summoned the Gadites, so the sons of Reuben, the families of Gad, and he summoned the half-tribe of Manasseh. Remember, these are the three tribes that got their possessed land, their land from God, on the east side of the Jordan River. They got this land from Moses, not from Joshua. So he summoned them, and this is what Joshua told this 2.5 tribes. You have kept all that Moses, the servant of the Lord, commanded you. You've done well. You've been promise keepers yourselves. You've kept your word. And you have listened to my voice. Not only did you hear and obey Moses, but you followed me as your commander-in-chief in battle. You've listened to my voice in all that I have commanded you. So he's giving accolade to Gad, Reuben, and Manasseh, to these tribes. And we wonder why. What is the issue? Why the accolade? What is this word that they kept, that Moses the servant commanded them? Anybody remember what it was? What did Moses tell these 2.5 tribes when he gave them land in Bashan and Ramoth Gilead? What did Moses tell them they had to do? You can have this land on the east side of the border, or east side of the Jordan River. You can settle your families here. You can build fences and houses for your flocks and for your family. But there's a stipulation. What was the stipulation? You know, that on one condition. You remember what the condition was? What did he tell them? 2.5 tribes. You can settle here instead of crossing the river and going into the land of Canaan. I will allow you to settle here on one condition. That condition was you have to cross the river with the other tribes and fight. You have to fight for the land of Canaan. And once Canaan has been defeated, then you're free from your obligation and you can go back. But don't think for 1 minute, guys, Gad, Reuben, and the half-tribe of Manasseh, don't think for 1 minute that you're going to get out of it and sit here on your pasture lands and shepherd your sheep while the other 9.5 tribes are risking their lives in military battle. Not going to happen. So I'll give you this land, Moses said. I'll settle you here. But you have to go across the river and fight with your brothers. So the half-tribe of Manasseh and the tribe of Gad and Reuben have done that. For the last 7 years, they have been engaged in battle with their fellow cousins, the tribes of Israel. The men crossed the river. The women, the children, and the great flocks and herds, they stayed on the east side. But the men crossed the river with their friends, with their family members, their cousins, to go fight. So Joshua is saying, I'm freeing you from your obligation now. You may go home and be reunited with your families, with your wives and your children. That's what's going on now. He's releasing this part of the army from their duty. Honorable discharge. Well done. You have kept your promise. You've done exactly what you said you would do. So the battle's over, and it's time for these tribes to return to their families. In verse 3, he says, you have not forsaken your brothers these many days to this day. That's over a 7-year period has transpired since they made the deal with Moses. And Joshua says, you have not abandoned your brothers. I mean, imagine you go into battle. Sometimes the battle is fierce. You say, you know what? I'm done with the fighting. I'm going to desert the troops. I'm going to go back over the river. I'm going to go back to my wife and my child. I mean, who goes into battle for 7 years without seeing their wife and their children? We send military men on tours of duty to different places. We send them into battle zones. But 7 years, I don't think we send them for 7 years. This was an enormous commitment that they made. And Joshua commends them for them. This is a good day. This is a very good chapter, the first part of it, and a good day for Israel. The tribes of Gad, Reuben, and Manasseh, the half of Manasseh, were to be honored for what they had done in keeping their word. You've not forsaken your brothers these many days to this day, but have kept the charge of the commandment of Yahweh your God. And because of that, now the Lord your God has given rest to your brothers. You were a big part of that, you and your fighting alongside them. God has given them rest as He spoke, as He promised. Therefore, turn now and go to your tents. Go back across the river to your own habitations and go be reunited with your families. Go to your tents and to the land of your possession, which Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave to you beyond the Jordan. And one more verse and we'll stop here. Joshua says, as you leave, do not forget this most important thing. Be very careful to observe the commandment and the law which Moses, the servant of the Lord, commanded you. To love the Lord your God. Love Yahweh, not the pagan gods. Love Yahweh only. Walk in all His ways. Keep His commandments and hold fast to Him. And serve Him with all your heart and all your soul. God demands 100% allegiance. He will not share His glory with any other. He's not going to let you worship Him and worship a false god at the same time. So Joshua says, great job, cousins. You are to be commended, honorably discharged from your duty. But don't forget, God gave us this land and promised to our father Abraham, don't walk away from God. Follow His commands. Obey everything that He taught us through Moses. And He sends them off with His love. And we'll pick up there next time and see just what it is that it sounds like everything is good. What is it that almost thrust the nation into civil war? What happened? We'll be there next time. Let's close in prayer.